Welcome to the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. I'm the sports editor of the Herald Democrat, Jason De La Rosa, and you're listening to the latest edition of the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast. We are about to enter Week 4. We have a month of football about to be in the books. We are creeping closer to district play for just about all of our teams. That's right around the corner. And we are excited about another week of high school football here on the podcast, here in Texoma. We are ready to go with a look back at what happened in Week 3 and what's in store for Week 4. We do as we always do here on the podcast. We start at the top, work our way to the bottom, talk about everything in between, and we have district games to talk about at the start of the podcast because both Sherman and Denison opened their respective district plays last week. Unfortunately, it did not go well for either of them in different fashions. And we will discuss that, starting with Sherman, as they opened District 5, 5A Division I play with a 44-7 loss against Frisco Reedy. This was a game that was 13-7 in the first quarter. Frisco Reedy came out, gets a quick score, gets a special team score, but Sherman fights back right near the end of the quarter, gets a touchdown. And we get to the middle of the second quarter, still 13-7. Sherman hanging in there, and then the floor fell out quickly. Reedy scored 3 times in a little over 5 minutes to end the half to go up 34-7, and they were able to hold Sherman off the board the rest of the way, tack on a field goal and a touchdown in the second half, and widen that gap a little bit. So Sherman is now 1-2 overall after back-to-back losses and 0-1 in district play. They take that record into their matchup at McKinney North, which is 7 o'clock at McKinney ISD Stadium. That's the new stadium, not the old Ron Poe. So make sure you go to the right stadium because sometimes people end up going to the wrong one. And this is, you hate to say it because it's early, but this is a must-win for both teams. And you have two teams that are trying to get back on track offensively. Looking at Sherman last week, only with 69 yards of offense, 31 yards on the ground, 38 through the air, and trying to put together something after a couple weeks, struggling to move the ball. Obviously, the game against Rock Hill come before that, also just scoring the one touchdown late in that one. Against Reedy, Dracavian Hughes, 15 carries for 36 yards. Caleb Orr goes 8 of 19 passing for 38 yards and a touchdown and an interception. Randy Nelson had that touchdown with a great catch in the side of the end zone. In back of a defender, one-handed pulling it in. Michael Hunt had 2 catches for 19 yards. But outside of that, tough sledding for Sherman. And like I said, they're going against another team in North that has struggled as well. They opened district play with a 49-13 loss against Frisco Lone Star. And obviously the loser of this game is going to be 0-2 in this district, which it's not a killer because it's such a big district and there's a lot of ground to make up. But you don't want to fall to 0-2. Trying to get out of an immediate hole. You want to be able to get some wins, get some confidence. Like I said, McKinney North has struggled as well. In their 3 games, they've scored 17 points, 14 points, and 13 points. So obviously Sherman had the big game in the opener against Denison to get back the axe. But since then, they've scored 7 points and 7 points. So This could be a get-right game for somebody to put up some points. It could also be a defensive struggle that comes down to the wire. And it's going to be, potentially one of those games here in a couple weeks. You look back and this could maybe potentially start something for somebody, get them on a roll, and we'll have to see. I mean, like I said, you talk about things getting late early. Sherman will turn around and play Frisco Centennial the next week. They're off to a 3-0 start on the season, winning their district opener. They've got Lone Star, which is a huge matchup early on in the district between the two undefeateds. Lone Star is one of the top teams in the state, so obviously that's a game that they're favored to win. And then Sherman has Heritage the week after that. So this is kind of the stretch where if you're gonna make a move, if you're gonna be in the mix, this is the start of where you want to have a good next month or so to try to make things happen. And this is and even after that, I mean, like I said, this next month is probably going to be the difference. Like we mentioned with Denison last week, the start to their district schedule is where they needed to make things happen. And I think Reedy is normally one of the best teams. We talked about that last week, how good they've been. They were the district runner-up last year. So I don't know if you could have thought that there was a chance for Sherman to win this game. You would have liked it was better than what the game last year. So that was a start, but obviously it had to be disappointing to have this only be a 6-point game in the middle of the second quarter, and like I said, you think you're hanging around, it is a close game, and then it just spiraled there in the second quarter, and they weren't able to do anything offensively to try to get back in it. So we'll see what Sherman can do. Like I said, I think this is a chance for them to go and get a win. McKinney North has a new coach. They had some players. They've already potentially they're on the verge of losing as many games as they did all of last year, and I think that's one of those situations where for them it's kind of snowballed as it could get in that situation as well. They haven't got off to a good start. This is a new district for them. We talked about that they were moving over into this district because of realignment. And early on, even with their non-district, they haven't had the type of success that they've had the last couple of years when they won 7 games each of those seasons and made the playoffs. So going to be interesting to see when Sherman goes down to McKinney North, 7 o'clock on Friday at McKinney ISD Stadium. The other team that opened district last week, Denison Yellow Jackets, they were looking to get their first win of the season. And unfortunately, they were unable to do that. They lost against Frisco Independence 30-28. So they are now 0-3 and 0-1 in district. That was the first one of the season for Independence, and obviously they are 1-0 in district play. And they did that by pulling off a big comeback in the fourth quarter. Denison led this game 14-3 at halftime. They led 21-10 going to the fourth quarter, and were really dominating defensively, especially in the first half. Independence started to figure out some things in the second half, letting their quarterback kind of scramble, call some design runs for him to make some things happen. They took advantage of an interception that was in Denison territory that got returned to the 1-yard line, and then they punched it in the next play. Obviously, that's hard on your defense to ask them when the other team has first and goal at the 1. But Independence scores 3 times in the fourth quarter. The last touchdown with a little over 5 minutes left to take the lead. Denison had a chance to potentially go down, score a touchdown, kick a field goal, potentially win 31-30. But they were unable to do that with the 2 chances that they had after Independence had taken the lead. Brandon Douglas had 4 catches for 69 yards and 2 touchdowns. Thomas Rendon, 15 carries for 53 yards and a touchdown. Roman Henderson also scored a rushing touchdown as well. And it was a very fast flip of the switch because, like I said, this looked like it was going to be maybe not an easy win, but like I said, until the fourth quarter, it didn't really feel like there was a big threatening by Independence. They did score first, like I said, in the third quarter, but Denison responded on the next possession. So that 14-10 went back to 21-10 really quickly, and it just got away. They weren't able to make some stops in the fourth quarter, and really didn't have. They had the one sustained drive to go up 28-24 with about 7 minutes left, but then Independence went down, scored right away, and they were able to hold on to the lead. So now Denison's going to play Frisco Emerson. That game is going to be at Munson Stadium, 7 o'clock on Friday. Emerson is 2-1. They are 0-1. They lost. They had the whole district watching them on last Thursday night. They were taking on Prosper Walnut Grove, and they lost 29-28 on a 2-point conversion at near the end. Walnut Grove decided, instead of kicking the extra point, going to probably going to overtime, they went for 2 in the win, and they got it. And that was a surprising loss, especially because, like we talked about last week, Emerson had just beaten Frisco Reedy 21-13 the week before. Now, a lot of that was special teams play, and if that doesn't happen, Reedy probably wins that game in a very low scoring contest, lower than 21-13. But obviously they played on Thursday. They were the only ones in the district. They kind of had the spotlight on them, and they lost. So they're already behind the 8 ball for what they thought, just as Denison is behind the 8 ball. I think they both thought this was going to be, 2 teams coming off wins to start district play, and it was going to be a key game, and it's even a bigger game. Like I said, you don't want to drop to 0-2 in this district because you have Lovejoy and Melissa and Anna as the potentially top 3. There's 3 or 4 teams that are fighting for that 4th spot, or potentially sitting beyond that, depending on what you might think of Anna. And Coach Whitson said, before the season, even before last week, before district, that Walnut Grove might be a problem. I think a lot of people were overlooking them because they're so brand new. Emerson's brand new too. This is only their 3rd year of competition, as opposed to Walnut Grove is in their 2nd year. They played that outlaw schedule that we kind of mentioned last week, and he said that there was a chance that Walnut Grove was going to surprise some people, and right off the bat in this district, they got Frisco Emerson. So obviously that changes the pecking order a little bit. And for Denison, obviously disappointing to lose the game last week, but you have Emerson this week, and you have Walnut Grove next week. So again, you've got these games in front of you that are going to be crucial to seeding and tiebreakers and stuff like that. You've got to find a way to bounce back from the loss and the fact that you are 0-3, and try to take care of business these next 2 weeks, because then you have 2 games after that. That should put you in a decent enough place to at least be in the mix going into the final month of the season. I do think the offense was better this last week. It's gotten better, obviously, just from a points total, every week. The yardage has been better. There have been more consistent drives. There have been guys making some big plays. Brandon Douglas has turned into the kind of go-to guy the last couple weeks. Over 100 yards against Decatur. Had the 2 touchdown catches, including a really nice one on a deep throw to the end zone over a defender. So the sophomores starting to make an impact in the passing game. And if they can keep that going, and the defense can continue to get some guys back, there were some guys back this past week, and it definitely showed through the first 3 quarters. And supposedly that there's supposed to be some more guys back this next week to kind of help steer that along. So another crucial game for Denison to start district play. Obviously, with the last week not going the way they expected, that potentially they can get the job done at home against Frisco Emerson, and what's going to be a tough game, 7 o'clock on Friday at Munson Stadium. So those are still the only 2 teams in the area that are playing in district so far. Everybody else is in non-district. I think a lot of people have one. It's probably split half and half. Some people still have some non-district games next week. We will get into some district games for some other people next week, which is going to be fun and exciting, because I know that's the stuff everybody really cares about. We've got some really good rivalries like we always do. but we're still sort of in tune-up mode. But even with that, there's still, I think, a lot of games that people are going to be interested in looking at this week for some local teams. But they're all non-district, so we'll work our way down like we always do. Looking at Van Alstyne going to Aubrey. Van Alstyne is 1-2 after it lost to Paris, 49-33, and Aubrey is 2-1. They are coming off a loss as well. They lost 38-13 against Brock, and like we've said about Brock, there's certainly no shame in losing to Brock with how good that program has been over the last 10 or 15 years. So Van Alstyne losing to Paris. Again, another game where they have a strong offensive output, and unfortunately the defense gives up some points. Obviously better than giving up in the 70s, but to give up 49 to Paris, this was a game where it's 21-7 after the first quarter, and then it's 41-14 going to the fourth quarter when Van Alstyne adds some stuff on there. Brady Carson, 22 carries for 97 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was also 17 of 32 passing for 211 yards, with a touchdown to Tim Moore, who had 2 catches for 61 yards. He also returned a kickoff for a touchdown. Castor Fonseca with 6 catches for 58 yards. And again, it's more about what this defense can figure out. We said coming into this game, Paris had been really good defensively, and what was the Van Alstyne offense going to do? And they finished with 33 points. So you've got to say, hey, that's a good showing there. Put up almost 350 yards of offense. And so that side, I don't think there's a worry about that group on that side of the ball, because in 3 of the games, in all 3 games, Van Alstyne's offense has scored at least in the low 30s, and then obviously the season opener scoring 72. But obviously the last 2 games the defense has not held a bit part of the bargain, and I think the way things are looking in their district, there may be a lot of shootouts, so it may not matter, but it also may come down to who can get stops or who can force turnovers when they absolutely need to do that, and I think that may be the story of that whole district, is who can score in the 30s or 40s, but who can keep somebody from getting there as well. And there's going to be another good test for Van Alstyne on Friday in that regard. I mentioned Aubrey's only scoring 13 points against Brock. In the 2 victories, they scored 33 points on the nose. So it's obviously not a team that's struggling, obviously just running up against a really good Brock team. And these teams know each other very well. They've met every year since 2018. Of course, we had mentioned before, they used to be in the same district. Obviously, Aubrey moving up to 4A Division I has taken them out of Van Alstyne's district, but they decided to keep playing. Last year, this was a low-scoring game. Aubrey won 17-7, and again, I think it's another good test for Van Alstyne going on the road against a very good opponent, and one that a whole lot about as you get ready for district play. And I think obviously all eyes are going to be on the defense. What can they do? What do they have in store for a team that knows what they like to do? And can they just get some confidence going into district play, so where the offense doesn't have to try to outscore people like they've had to try the last 2 games. So that's Van Alstyne going to Aubrey, 7:30 on Friday night in a non-district matchup there. One of the bigger games that people around the state are going to be looking at is Pottsboro at Munster. This game is at 7 o'clock on Friday. And the reason everyone's watching this one is you have a 3-0 Pottsboro team coming off a 43-13 win over Mount Vernon. And Munster is 2-1. They won last week 56-21 against Windthorst. And the reason everybody's looking at this game amongst the better ones in the lower classifications is Pottsboro stayed at number 7 in the 3A Division Dave Campbell's rankings, and Munster is number 3 in the Class 2A Division 2 rankings. Munster's only loss is against Holiday, who's number 8 in the 3A Division 2 rankings. So this is a game that people are excited to look at. And I will say too, for Pottsboro people, know this, because this is a matchup that's happened the last couple years. It's been back and forth. There have been some good games in this rivalry, which is I think why they wanted to continue it. Pottsboro won this game 28-7 last year. They've played 7 times total, and Pottsboro leads 4-3. So it's been a very even matchup, and I think a lot of people think this is going to be a good game. We mentioned, this is another game like this past week. Pottsboro played this opponent last year, so they know what they're getting into. That was the case with the Mount Vernon win, and that was a game that I think a lot of people thought would be closer. And just because of the familiarity and the fact that Mount Vernon had won the game last year, and they really couldn't get anything going against Pottsboro. 2 field goals in the first half. Pottsboro's up 27-6 at halftime. They scored 2 more times in the third quarter to really break it open and kind of cruise in the fourth quarter from there. Carson Nix with the big game in this one. 10 carries for 115 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had both of the touchdowns in the third quarter to help break things open. Caden Humphrey, 14 carries for 96 yards and a touchdown. He was also 7 of 13 passing for 155 yards and a touchdown to Jet Mackey, who had 10 catches for 49 yards. And Xavier Brady had 4 catches for 77 yards. He also had a fake punt touchdown, taking that 70 yards on a direct snap and going the distance there. And Pottsboro, again, after having 2 close games to open the season, really not a lot of drama in this one, so that's a good sign. I think again, early on we talked about with the Cardinals, there were some pieces that were new. Obviously, what was this running game going to look like? And it's continued to flourish. Again, this past week against Mount Vernon, 32 carries for 322 yards. Some big plays on the ground, like we mentioned, including the fake punt that counts in there as a rush. So that adds to that number. Even if you take that out, you're still talking about rushing for over 250 yards. And so obviously I think they've figured out how they're going to attack people. I think one of the reasons I think that Carson Nix had a big game in this one was that a lot of the focus the first couple weeks had been on Caden Humphrey, what he was doing on the ground. He was getting a lot of carries, and I think it was one of those situations where maybe Mount Vernon wanted to let somebody else beat them, so to speak, and obviously Nix had a huge game with the 3 touchdown runs. So that sets up nicely for, again, going into a new district with a lot of people that you don't know. Pottsboro's in a position where they're rolling. If they're not the favorite in this district, I would be surprised, especially once we get there. And again, this is a game against Munster. I think both teams are looking at a good game. A loss is not going to matter. I think Munster is still one of will be one of the favorites in the region, in 2A Division 2, which is not something Collinsville people want to talk about, but we will talk about something about Munster and Collinsville and Lindsay when we get down to Collinsville, because that could be shaping up to be a very interesting setup in their district. But again, I think you're looking at good competition. You're looking at potentially a really good game, and it's going to be better off for both of these teams. Obviously, Munster is playing a very good schedule, and playing a couple divisions up because I think they want that test for when they get into the playoffs and when they get into district play as well. So that's definitely one I think a lot of people are going to be looking at, just because you have 2 of the better lower ranked teams classification-wise with 3A and 2A when Pottsboro goes to Munster at 7 o'clock on Friday night. The other team at the 3A Division I level for our area is Whitesboro. They are going on the road to face Commerce. Whitesboro is 1-2 after it lost 58-0 against Graham, and Commerce is also 1-2, coming off a 31-21 loss against Farmersville. So Whitesboro's kind of going backwards. We talked about obviously the rock fight that they were in last week against Bells, only scoring the 6 points. After having a success in the opener, scoring in the 40s. Whitesboro didn't score for the first time since 2015. But they're playing a team in Commerce that has allowed at least 27 points in every game. So maybe again this is a chance for the Bearcats to bounce back. We said about Graham, they're always pretty good. They're always in the playoffs. That's like the minimum baseline for them. Maybe they're in a situation where they've got a really good team again this year, and they put up some big numbers in this one, almost 500 yards. It was 43 to nothing at halftime, and they really shut down Whitesboro. 28 carries for 8 yards, 53 yards through the air, 61 yards total. And obviously that's a bigger it's a bigger school, a 4A school. I think Whitesboro would have liked to have been 2-0 going into that game. So you kind of look at that and say, oh, that's okay. We're 2-1. We've got a chance, a winnable game the next week and getting ready for district play. But obviously I think again it's a game where you have both teams that are coming off losses. That's a decent trip out there to Commerce for Whitesboro, and we'll see how they bounce back. Again, we said at the beginning of the season, this is a young team, a lot of sophomores, a lot of guys in their first year as a starter at the varsity level, or guys who played as freshmen last year, got a taste in the latter half of the season, and then have been elevated into starting roles. How are they going to handle a game like that? How are they going to bounce back? And this is what non-district is for, to see the response, to see how things go this week. And again, for them, I don't think this is going to change their trajectory. They're viewed as a playoff team in their district. It's a little hard to project because it's a brand new group. But again, you'd like to see a good response from Whitesboro this week, going out to Commerce on Friday night at 7:30. Dropping down to the 3A Division II level, we've got a couple of interesting games here. The best place to probably start is Gunner, because Gunner has gotten past the gauntlet. Unfortunately, it didn't make it unscathed. It got scathed again after losing to Salina 38-7. So Gunner is now 1-2, and this is a little bit of uncharted territory, not just for these guys currently on the roster, but for the program in general, because Gunner has lost back-to-back games for the first time since 2011. It has not lost 3 straight games since it lost the last game in 2000 and the first 2 games in 2001, and it has not lost 3 straight in the same season since it went 0-3 to start the 2000 season. So this is also the first time since 2011 that Gunner has had a losing record at any point in a season. If you throw in the first game, because that was a hard-fought win over Houston Kincaid, and since then they've been beat up physically. They've had guys get hurt. They've had guys come in and out of the lineup, playing 2 very good teams, 2 very much bigger teams than them. And in the long run, it's still not going to matter. It didn't go as well as they would have hoped. I still think if you would have given me a full strength Gunner, I think it would have been at least respectable. in terms of the closeness to a score. The game against this past week against Salina was 17-0 at halftime, and then Salina kind of broke through in a big way in the third quarter to get its other 21 points. But obviously it was a much better showing against Salina than it was against Anna, and with the way that Anna had jumped to the big lead. Not as many mistakes by Gunner in this one. Obviously, huge rivalry. They hadn't played in 25 years. Both sides were wanted to play very well and show, just because we're next door, we're the better team. Gunner gets on the board late. Dylan Tokars with a 57-yard touchdown catch from Preston Tarpley. Tokars finished with 3 catches for 59 yards. Brock Body with 19 carries for 81 yards. And again, it's gonna get easier. Maybe not starting this week, or maybe starting this week, because Gunner's gonna host Sanger to end non-district play. Sanger is also 1-2. They won last week 58-57 against Community. They got a big game from their running back Reginald Jones. He had 402 yards and 4 touchdowns on 30 carries. But it is obviously a step down from playing the number 4 team in 4A Division 1. It is a step down from playing the program that won the 4A Division 1 championship last year and is now in 5A with close to 1,600 kids. But this is going to be an interesting setup, because you have a Gunner team coming off these last couple weeks that have been emotional and charged with who they were playing, and how is Gunner going to do against these bigger teams? Can they play well? Can they win? And like I said, they've been dealing with injuries. They've been dealing with just the physicality of these defenses, and Sanger's coming off a crazy win. They're getting ready for district. Obviously, they feel they're obviously not scared or worried about playing a team like Gunner. Coach Rogers over there, when he was at Denison, when he was at Tioga, probably back when he was at Snyder before he came to this area, he's not going to care who he's going to play people. He's going to play the best of the best. He's not going to care. He hasn't at any of the places he's been. He wants his team to get better and play good people, and get that experience. And so that's why it's interesting from this aspect. Is Gunner gonna start turning it on from the standpoint of, now we're really mad about what's happened the last couple of weeks. We need to prove, in quotation marks, that we're still the same Gunner. The rankings came out again this week. They're still number 1 in 3A Division 2. No one is going to ding them for the 2 losses that they've had, because how many people in general, not just in 3A Division 2, would be willing to play those 2 games back to back like Gunner did. So until we see otherwise, once district play starts, everybody still is going to think Gunner is Gunner until it doesn't happen. A lot of people are still predicting them to go, if not deep into December, to win the whole thing again and three-peat, which is a very tough thing to do. And they've got some teams along the way as we get down the road. There's probably going to be some rematches of some very good teams from last year that hope to knock them off. But again, the biggest thing has been, can Gunner get healthy with all these injuries and bumps and bruises, with district play about to start. And I would think, obviously, it would go, I don't know if it would go a long way, but it would go a way for them to get back on track, get a win, and kind of let everybody kind of breathe and say, okay, that was playing Anna and Salina. And no offense to Sanger, I think Sanger's got a chance to make a move in their district, because they're in Van Alstyne's district. in Coach Rogers' second year. But it's obviously for Gunner a change in opponent, and I think they've got a chance to get back on the track that they thought. And honestly, if you would have asked a lot of people before the season, if you would have said what does Gunner finish, they go 14-2, win the state championship, and the two losses are the two losses that they had. So as long as they stay on that course, I think everybody's going to be able to put those behind them and kind of breathe a little more normal over the next 2 months for sure. And that's Gunner hosting Sanger at 7:30 for that non-district game down in Gunner. Next team we'll talk about Bells, who has finished as the runner-up to Gunner the last couple years in that district. They're going to go on another road trip after going up to Oklahoma last week. They got a 34-22 loss up in Plainview, and they're going to go on the road this week to Cooper at 7:30 on Friday. Bells is 1-2 after that loss. Cooper is 1-2 after they beat Paris Chisholm 58-6. So obviously some size of relief for them to get that first win. This is an interesting matchup for a couple reasons. From the opponent side, Cooper has already lost more regular season games than it did if you added up 2021, 2022, and 2023. They only lost one game in the regular season in those three, and they started this year at 0-2. So this is a group that is experiencing something that they haven't experienced. These seniors, since they were in high school, coming into the season, that's all they really knew about is, hey, we have really amazing regular seasons, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then they lose the first two games, their senior year. And it's probably like, whoa, what the heck this is not how this goes. They bounce back in a big way. So there's that. You have a Bells team, obviously, played Pottsboro close the first week, beat Whitesboro in the rock fight last week, or 2 weeks ago, excuse me, and then last week goes on the road, and I said, I don't know what to expect against Plainview. They had only played one game. Obviously, for me covering Grayson County schools and paying attention to who people play in the playoffs, Oklahoma's out of my vision, so I had no idea what to expect. I don't know how much Bells was able to glean from just the one game. Obviously, not somebody they see all the time. From what I could tell and how this game went, it was Plainview's passing attack that was able to hurt Bells. Obviously, we know that's a very contrast in styles for what Bells likes to do. They were able to do what they do on the ground, because that's usually what Bells does. But it was a close game at halftime. Plainview was able to do some stuff in the second half to take the lead and kind of grow that to the final margin. Bryson Thompson, 17 carries for 96 yards and 2 touchdowns. Bryson Wright, 12 carries for 44 yards and a touchdown. Blake Reeves, 10 carries for 56 yards and also had a 43-yard catch. If we're looking at it, probably turnovers being the issue in this one, a handful of fumbles that was probably the difference when you boil it down to it. And so now Bells is kind of in this spot where this is not normal for them. They're 1-2 for the first time since 2019, which was Coach West's first year there. They obviously have gotten, not just off to strong starts, but they've had strong starts, strong middles, and strong ends. And usually, by the end of the regular season, there's the loss to Gunner and maybe a loss to somebody else, and they're sitting there at 8-2, or maybe 9-1. And so this is sort of you don't want to say it's a gut check for them, but district's around the corner, and you don't want to go in without some momentum, without some confidence. The good thing for for Bells, if you're going to say, well, this is a passing team is what beat us last week. Cooper is not a passing team. Their head coach, Coach Castorena, he came from Gunner. He runs that offense and he's gonna run the ball and that's his thing and so this is gonna be run versus run and it may come down to which defense is gonna stick their nose in there and do the best at stopping some third downs, get first and 10 to second and 12 and then it's third and 9 and then some teams got to try to pass to make things happen. That may be the difference in this one. But again, it's for what it's been the last couple of years, this would have been a very interesting matchup, and I think it still is for two teams that have had very good success, not Gunner Collinsville level success, getting to the region final type things, but obviously having really good regular seasons, winning 2 or 3 games in the playoffs. They're kind of mirror images of what they've done the last couple of years. And obviously both of them have a chance to get to 2-2 and sort of build on whatever happens on Friday in this non-district game at Cooper. A couple other games at this level, both with teams that are coming off losses. SNS is going to be hosting Rivercrest at 7:30 on Friday. SNS is 0-3. They lost 42-32 against Nakona, and Rivercrest is 3-0. They won 59-27 against Clarksville. And this was another game of being close at halftime, tied at 14. Nakona scores twice in the third quarter to go up 28-14. Looks like it's getting away from SNS. Then they end up getting a field goal and a touchdown to get back within 28-24. But Nakona has just a little bit more in the fourth quarter, sandwiching some touchdowns around an SNS score, and that's how you get to 42-32. And again, I think talking about Denison getting better each game from an offensive standpoint, obviously it's it's the best effort by SNS this season. I think they've gotten better in kind of understanding what they're doing with that new offense under Coach Pike, and it was the most points scored by SNS in 20 games. So the question is, can you keep that going? Now you've got a team coming in. You look at this matchup and you say, well, this is 3-0 versus 0-3, and I would say that is true. That is statistically true. But I would say this is a Rivercrest team that has matched its win total from last season. So they weren't very good last year. They're off to a good start. They beat Clarksville last week, and I would say this: we've seen Clarksville play some people around here or adjacent opponents. So if you want to compare scores, you can do that. But I think this is a game that I think SNS has a chance in. I thought they would. We talked about the game last week against Nakona. Thought they would have a chance in that one. You had two teams searching for their first win. They seem pretty evenly matched. SNS gets 16 carries for 114 yards from Hunter Corville, who also threw for 95 yards and a touchdown, which was a 59-yarder to Elisha Gentry. Kenny Melton, 10 carries for 109 yards and a touchdown. Melton also had a fumble return for a score. So did Corville. And it was better. And I think that's been the thing. When you're 0-10 from the year before and you're coming into the season on a 16-game losing streak, which is now a 19-game losing streak, you need to have positive things. You need to have something to build on. You need to see progress. And I think this was the first game against Nakona. You saw that. You saw a game. You're only down 4 points going to the fourth quarter. That's a winnable game going to the fourth quarter. And I think even with the record that it is with Rivercrest, I think this is a chance for SNS to be building on that confidence, to have a chance in this game. and we'll see what happens. And I think if they can, even if they don't win, but if it's another close game, again, I think that sets them up for a situation where there are teams in the district that I think they can compete with, or they believe they can compete with, and that's the biggest thing. When you're losing all these games and the scores are not close, and they're not close every week, at some point you go, well, how are we supposed to compete with these teams? And I think you have a 10-point loss last week. If you have a win or a close loss this week, the kids understand that that's progress. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we'll see. And I believe this is SNS's homecoming, so you have all that pomp and circumstance as well to want to play well for homecoming as well. And so who knows? We'll see what happens. And that is one game as we get ready for district play that I'm interested to see if SNS can keep that momentum going when they host Rivercrest at 7:30 on Friday night. And the last 3A team on the list is the Howe Bulldogs. They are going to be hosting Pilot Point this Friday at 7:30. They are 1-2 after they lost 41-12 against Bowie. While Pilot Point is coming off a 35-0 loss against Lindsay, and Pilot Point is 0-3. And so to recap, Howe's game last week, unfortunately very similar to their game against Boyd, similar score in the season opener. But again, this was a game at halftime. Howe is only down 14-12. You have to feel pretty good about that. And then again, the snowball in the second half, too hard to stop rolling downhill. Bowie scores 3 times in the third quarter to break the game open. And so that's what happened there. Braden Ulmer had a rushing touchdown there, as did Ryland Strong. And it was a bit of a step back on both ends from the win against Bonham. Pilot Point is coming in an interesting spot. They have lost 15 straight games dating back to the 2022 season. And I think we talked about with the Howe Bonham matchup. I think this is probably one where both teams think that they can come away with a win. I think you have to feel good again. Howe's at home. I think they're going to try to do what they did, in that Bonham game, which was run the ball, grind it out, play very good defense. Pilot Point lost to Bonham. So if we want to play the comparative game that everybody likes to play, it's not just that they're coming off the loss to Lindsay, and again we'll talk about Lindsay here in a second when we talk about Collinsville. But you have a Pilot Point team that in the 3 games has only scored 6 points. They lost to Bonham to open the season 7-6. They lost to Callisburg 37-0, and they lost to Lindsay 35-0. So again, you have a team that lost to the team that you beat by 2 touchdowns, lost to them by a point. So maybe that's the starting point. And again, it's an offense that has struggled, scoring just 1 touchdown in 3 games and been shut out the last 2 games. So again, it's a winnable game. You get a chance to get some momentum going into district play. And I think they're in a position to do that. And we'll see what happens with that game. Again, I think we could have another low scoring 28-6 or something, 21-0 type of games for Howe hosting Pilot Point at 7:30 on a Friday night. Dropping down to the 2A level, I don't know. I think the most interesting game is probably Tioga at Lone Oak, 7:00 on, or at least for the 2A Division I teams, because the Collinsville's game is very interesting. But Tioga at Lone Oak at 7:00 on Friday is very interesting. So Tioga's 2-1. They won last week 30-27 against Edgewood. Lone Oak is 3-0. they won 33-22 against Big Sandy. For those people who remember, Lone Oak used to be in the district with Gunner and Bells and Howe. They were usually at the bottom. I think they snuck into the playoffs maybe once. They haven't had a winning season since 2016. So 3-0 start for them. It's great. Maybe they'll end that streak, all that sort of thing. The Tioga portion is interesting because obviously we talked about last week, bouncing back from that loss to Collinsville the first week, finding a way to win at the end in the final minute. This game was not final minute, but it was pretty close. But was another late touchdown for Tioga in this one. Rocky Urich on the 1 yard keeper it was the deciding touchdown. And so you have a team in Tioga that has had a good couple weeks, bouncing back from the loss. But both of the losses are close. Or excuse me, both of the wins are close, and we could easily be sitting, if it wasn't for a handful of plays, they could be sitting at 0-3. But they've been good enough, and sometimes that's all it takes. They are, talking to Coach Birdwell. They've had some guys out. They've had to rotate some guys around, and they've still found ways to, like I said, to make plays. Game on the line. Find a way to get the job done. Like I said, Urich had the game-winning touchdown. 6 carries for 38 yards in that TD. Was 24 of 44 passing for 256 yards with a touchdown and an interception. Johnny Dorpinghouse had another big game. 8 catches for 111 yards. Jake David, 7 catches for 70 yards and the touchdown. Austin Norwood had 6 catches for 57 yards, but he also returned a fumble for a touchdown. Slade Babbitt had a pick 6. So that was 2 defensive touchdowns in this game. And again, it was enough. They found a way to get the score at the end. They found a way to keep Edgewood from going down and scoring to win at the end. And that's why I think this game is interesting because, again, you have a Lone Oak team that is feeling good. They're not 0-3 like they might normally be. And it's at their place. So I am interested to see what Tioga can do going out there. Again, I still think they're going to be in position for a playoff spot in their district. But this district is looking really good. I know everybody wants to you don't pay attention maybe to your district until it starts happening, or we get to the week of district and you say, oh wow, hey, yeah, these are the matchups. If you look at this district, there are 7 teams in this district, and 4 of them are undefeated. And if you're in Tioga's shoes, that means you're not one of them. So there's 4 teams right now that think they look pretty good about a playoff spot because they haven't lost yet. And it's going to be, I think this is we've said this district has been really close. This has a chance to be a phenomenal district race. And obviously Tioga was in the thick of it last year, near the top of the standings. But right now there are probably a bunch of people that are going, well, maybe they're not as good as they were last year, even though they have a lot of the same pieces back. And I think this is one of those games to go on the road against a team that's off to a really hot start. Can they find a way to keep that momentum going as they get ready for district play? So I think that might be the most intriguing of the 3 teams in the district playing this week. And the only reason I say that is because of who the opponents for Whitewright and Tom Bean are this week. So Whitewright is going to be going to Valley View. Whitewright is 3-0. They won 42-8 last week against Quinlan Bowles. Valley View is 1-2, and Valley View lost 64-7 against Tom Bean. So we'll obviously be talking about Tom Bean in a minute. But if you're Valley View and you lost 64-7 against Tom Bean, if you're Whitewright, how good do you feel coming into this as your next matchup with the hot start that they're off to? Obviously 3-0. First time Whitewright's been 3-0 since 2014. If they win this week and get to 4-0, first time they have been 4-0 since 2010. And everything from that point on, we'll go back to 2010 because that team went undefeated in the regular season. So regardless, you're still talking, 14 years to have the best start in for the program. They've scored 42 points in a row, 3 straight games. The last time that happened was in that 2014 season. If they were to score at least 42 points this week, that hasn't been done since at least 1932. The records get spotty after that, but I went back to 1932. Yes, that's my job. Yes, that's how I spend my time. And so it hadn't happened since the 32 season. It may have happened before that. I don't know for sure, but that's how long it's been that would happen if it does. Valley View scoring the 7 points last week against Tom Bean. It was relatively close in the first half, or relative is a relative term. But then obviously Tom Bean blew the doors off of that game. And then the week before that, Valley View lost 47-0 against Santo. They did win their opener 33-29 against Alvord. And again, so if you're White-Wright, you're playing an opponent this week who beat one of the teams in your district, who was 0-3, to point out, by 4 points, and then got creamed last week by Tom Bean, another team in your district. So this is a good measuring stick for White-Wright, getting ready for them for district play. So that's the only thing interesting about this game. Because I don't think if Valley View has trouble with Tom Bean, I don't know how well they can handle with what White-Wright's been doing, because their offense has been great. And last week again, no exception, winning 42-8 against Bowles. Looking at that box score, you have, let me see if I can find it. Where's that box score? Ah, yes, there it is. Again, 14-0 after the first quarter, 28-0 going to the fourth quarter. Bowles avoided the shutout with a touchdown with about 4 minutes left. But again, Colt Yancey, 11 of 19 passing for 309 yards and four touchdowns. Excuse me. Running the ball, they only had 80 yards, but they only ran it 12 times when they barely ran 30 plays in a game that they won 42-0. Gage Walker, 5 carries for 62 yards on a touchdown. Also, 2 catches for 39 yards and a touchdown. Easton Helgren, 2 catches for 38 yards on a touchdown. Also returned an interception for a touchdown. Austin Bayo, his 1 catch was a 61-yard touchdown. And Alex Reeves, who finished with 5 catches for 169 yards, had a touchdown grab as well. And again, this is an offense, in the 50s twice, scored 42 in this one, and the defense has been really good as well. You talk about giving up 7 points, 12 points, and 7 and 8 points. So again, it's working on both sides. That you can't say it's the offense is carrying things or the defense is carrying things. They're both doing a really good job. Bowles came in with the undefeated record as well last week. We said, hey, somebody here is going to get to 3-0 that hasn't had a lot of success in doing that. And I know people might want to say, who is White-Wright beaten? Celeste is 0-3 on the season. Clarksville, who they opened up with, is 0-3 on the season, and that's fine. But they've kicked the snot out of everybody they've played. There's a decent chance that happens this week. And if you do that, again, we've also said this is a team that has already won more games than last year. They went 2-8. They matched that by the second week. They surpassed it. You've got a chance to double your win total. And then the question is, what can you do in this district that looks pretty fun and even, and a lot of teams have had success. So White Wright's going to Valley View, looking to get to 4-0 for the first time in 14 years, and they're in a really good spot to do that when they go out to Valley View Friday at 7:30. And then the other game involving a team from this district, again at 3-0, Tom Bean. We mentioned they got there with the 64-7 win against Valley View. So they are 3-0 for the first time since 2018. And if they get to 4-0, it's the first time they've done that since 2008. The 64 points last week, most points they've scored in 11 years. And they did it majority of the game through the air, as Donnie Hooten is 31 of 37 passing for 356 yards and 6 touchdowns. He also ran for a score. He had 3 carries for 44 yards and that touchdown. Garrett Kelly had 4 catches for 94 yards as the main receiver. He also got into the end zone twice, and beyond him, it was a very balanced. You complete 31 passes to 6 guys. It's going to be relatively close. Everybody of those 6 caught at least 4 passes. Hagan Darney, 6 catches for 63 yards and a touchdown. Dyson Ferris, 7 catches for 59 yards and a touchdown. McGuire Poole, 6 catches, 50 yards and a touchdown. And Bobby Rogers had 4 catches for 47 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for a touchdown. And Dallas Peavy, 4 carries for 46 yards and a touchdown. Reed Sharp, 10 carries for 55 yards. Throw him in there as well. As Tom Bean put up over 500 yards of offense. And this game was 23-0 after the first quarter, 43-7 at halftime. And again, we've said it about Tom Bean from day one. This is a team on a mission. This is a team out to get that playoff spot that has eluded them. And again, they're in a really good spot at 3-0. They're going to Prairieland. Prairieland is 2-1. They lost this last week, 35-8 against Leonard. And they are in a position where if they win this game, they will match their win total from last season by getting to 3 wins. And again, I think this is another game where Tom Bean you never want to say they're going to win like they did for this last game because it's hard to match 64-7. But I think this is a game where I think that Tom Bean is spreading the ball around. I don't think you can look at what they've done and say, this is where they're going to go. This is how they're going to do it. They have done a really good job. If you look at the previous games in their passing attack, they've spread it around quite a bit. And defensively, the last 2 weeks, only given up 7 points in each of those games after having to win a shootout in the opener. So they're gonna. It seems like they're peaking at the right time. If they go out and get this win at Prairieland on Friday, 4-0, going into district play, big game, and I get to look ahead because that's the fun part of my job is I can look ahead and talk about things that maybe coaches may not want to let their teams know about or focus on or try to get ahead of the team that's in front of them. But I will point out we are officially 1 week away that if White Wright takes care of its business and Tom Bean takes care of its business, we have the District 6-2A Division I opener, Tom Bean hosting White Wright. We could have 4-0 versus 4-0 right off the bat in the district. And how, I mean, that would be huge. That's a monster game if that happens. And honestly, even if they were to both lose this week, that still is going to be a monster. But if you have undefeated Tom Bean versus undefeated White Wright to kick off district play, that's a huge game next week. So we're almost there making that happen. And all we need is for White Wright to do its business against Valley View, Tom Bean to handle its business at Prairie Land. 2 games on the road. But I think that's what we'll be talking about next week, and we'll see if Tom Bean and White Wright can hold up their ends of the bargain on Friday night at 7:30. 2 more games. We've got Collinsville going to Wolf City. This is a big game. I think a lot of people at the 2A level are interested in this. 7 o'clock on Friday night. You have Collinsville at 3-0, which won 28-14 against Callisburg. And Wolf City is 2-0. They won 62-0 against Celeste. Wolf City had a bye in week 2, which is why they're not 3-0. Collinsville comes into this. They moved up a couple spots in the 2A Division 2 rankings by Dave Campbell's. They're up to number 8. I think Wolf City is close, maybe, to being in the Division 1, 2A Division 1 rankings. They're not in the top 10, but I have a feeling if they beat Collinsville, they're probably going to sneak in. So these are 2 really good teams. Wolf City's been really good, for the last decade or so now. They always make the playoffs. They've made the playoffs every year since 2012. And obviously we know what Collinsville has done the last couple of years, making it to back-to-back region finals before losing to the eventual champion in Albany. And again, they keep doing what they're doing there. I'd say it every week, but we didn't know what to expect from this Collinsville team, and we're finding out. They're finding ways to win. They're playing really good defense. Again, this is the worst defensive game they've had because they allowed 7 points in the first game and 2 points, which I guess technically is not on the defense because it's a safety. So they gave up 14 points in this one. So that defense is playing really well, like really, really well. And I think that's obviously been a key point for them in that this was, like I said, this was their closest game. Again, this is a game that's 14-14 at halftime. Second half shutout. Collinsville does just enough to win, and that's what good teams do. And again, they're playing a team 2 levels up. Callisburg being a 3A Division 2 team who's had a decent start. To hold them to 14 points, find a way to win. Big part of that was Chad Davidson. He had 3 catches for 87 yards. All the catches were touchdowns, so 3 for 3 on touchdown catches, 87 yards. Garrett Trevino, 9 carries, 122 yards, and a touchdown. JJ Jenkins, 12 of 19 passing for 142 yards with the 3 TDs. Also had an interception. But again, it was another balanced attack, yardage-wise. And I think it was the first real challenge to them offensively compared to the first 2 games. But again, that's a good sign that here's a team that's able to get the job done. I think Wolf City is probably the best team that Collinsville has faced so far. It's kind of hard to tell. I mean, obviously they played again. We mentioned Celeste has not gotten off to the hot start. They're now 0-3. Celeste has played 3 really good opponents. But obviously beating them 62-0, it's really hard to tell. And then Wolf City opened against Quitman, and they beat them 29-13. Again, that's a team that's 0-3. But Wolf City brought back a lot of people from last year's team that was very good. They've got one more non-district game against Timpson before they get into district play. And again, they're in that district with Tom Bean and White Wright and Tioga and them. So that's why that district is going to be so fun, because you have, Trenton's undefeated, Tom Bean is undefeated, White Wright is undefeated, and Wolf City is undefeated. And so it's going to be, as I said, it's going to be an interesting matchup. Obviously, somebody's going to get their first loss, and again, I think you may look back towards the end and say, well, that's not really a bad loss because of who it was against. So Collinsville, Wolf City, 7:00 on Friday. I think that's one of the bigger two-way matchups to or an all two-way matchup because of the starts that both of those teams are off and what they've done in recent seasons to make you think, oh, this is another really strong showing for both of them. And for the first time this season, we get to talk about Texoma Christian. They have their first game of the season. They are playing at Carrollton Prince of Peace. Prince of Peace is 2-0. They actually did not play last week. They had a bye after getting 2 wins to open their season. And I don't know a whole lot about what Texoma Christian's got because they haven't played a game yet, despite the fact that we're a month into the season. This was an intentional deal. They're only going to play 6 games. They have 3 non-district games and 3 district games. And part of the reason that they decided to start a little later is last year they did a full season, full schedule, and they were really banged up by the time they got to district. Obviously, you're in 6-man, so you don't have a huge roster to begin with. And the thinking was, if we start a couple weeks later, play our non-district games, get ready, get tuned up, we'll be in better shape for the games that actually matter. We'll have the guys that we need to win those games, to make the playoffs, to beat the people that we have to, so we can make the playoffs. And it's an interesting gamble. Obviously, I don't think people would do that at the 11-man ranks. You've got enough depth to be able to do that. But I'm interested to see if this works. So this is the first one for Texoma Christian. They're still relatively young. It's a lot of guys who were sophomores and freshmen last year are back in some of the starting spots. Quarterback Nate Reed's back. They've got some other guys that are 2 or 3 year players, and they add some guys from their junior high. It's going to be interesting to see how they mix in. But they're only, like I said, they're only in a 4-team district. It was bigger, and then some things happened because it's taps and wacky taps things happen. So a couple teams ended up dropping out of their district. So they only have 3 district opponents. And it's an interesting decision, and we'll see if it pays off. But Texoma Christian is going to hit the field 7:00 on Friday at Carrollton Prince of Peace to officially join us in the 2024 football season. So that's a recap of week 3. That's a look at what's going to happen in week 4. We're there, people. It's all coming together. The halfway point, we'll be talking about the halfway point of the football season next week. It's crazy. And again, a lot of good games, a lot of interesting matchups. Try to stay cool. I know this. We have some non-football weather for a late September games. So whatever game you're going to, try to stay cool. And thanks for checking out the podcast. Again, you can follow everything we do. Follow me on Twitter at Jason De La Rosa is my handle. We have stuff on our Facebook pages, whether it's Herald Democrat Facebook page, or if you just want to care about football or high school sports in general, All-Texomaland Facebook page is the one to follow. You'll get the link to the podcast. You get previews. You get the game stories. You get athlete of the week. You get everything you want. So check out those, and we will talk to you next time on the Herald Democrat Sports Podcast.